our solution, I believe, solves a lot of those bottlenecks. Finally, we'll be doing a live demonstration and then I'll do a Q&A. So Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is a global phenomenon, and I want to say first that I'm elated to see the diversity of faces that we have in the crowd here today, because I think that people tend to make generalizations about who may or may not be using Bitcoin, and from what I can tell today, I think that the only statement to be made is that there is no generalization. The value proposition is pretty universal. So the first inkling of Bitcoin sprouted up on the internet on Halloween of 2008. An entity known as Satoshi Nakamoto made a post to the cryptography mailing list on Newsgroup, basically stating that he had developed and was working on an electronic cash payment system that allows for two parties to transact with one another without the need for a trusted third-party entity. So the beauty of the internet is that this is all public, and you can, of course, go look at this, and you can see the discussion that was had around that. And people were skeptical, rightfully so, but Satoshi was not dismayed, and roughly 2 months later, he had developed the protocol and mined the first 50 Bitcoins into existence in what is now known as the Genesis block, block 0. So if you're familiar with Bitcoin, you also know that there are ways of embedding messages in your transactions if you so choose to pay the fee. And I think it's interesting that Satoshi, in his infinite wisdom, kind of left a message for us in the first block to kind of pinpoint the ecosystem and environment from which Bitcoin came into existence. And it reads as follows when decrypted. January 3rd, 2009, The Times, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So the Bitcoin economy sort of chugged along, and it was kind of relegated mostly to the technically savvy portion of the internet. Didn't really garner much widespread adoption. But in November of 2010, the market cap actually reached $1 million for the first time at a conversion rate of 50 cents per Bitcoin. Soon after, it reached dollar parity on Mt. Gox, meaning one Bitcoin was $1. And as we know, the rest is pretty much history. 2 years later, it hit $1 billion market cap, and while it is incredibly volatile, it continues to grow at a relatively steady rate. So the beauty of Bitcoin and why you should care about it is really that it offers some aspects for financial transactions which up to this point have not been possible. Bitcoin is totally decentralized. There's no central authority that governs it. And for this reason, there are certain inherent aspects of the Bitcoin protocol which lend itself to being a very interesting potential for the future of money. Primarily, there is a clearly delineated supply and inflation rate. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence, and currently the supply is growing at roughly 3,600 Bitcoins per day. Again, the Bitcoin protocol is decentralized. It runs on peer-to-peer technology, and because of this, Bitcoin is incredibly resilient. There is no central server anywhere that somebody can go and unplug. Bitcoin will exist so long as there's two computers connected to one another, talking with one another and verifying transactions. Another key aspect is that transactions are entirely irreversible, meaning that there is no dispute mediation and there is no issues with chargebacks. Now, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of irony. MasterCard is having their chargeback conference next door right now. Clearly, it's a big issue, dealing with chargebacks. So Bitcoin opens up the door for global commerce in a way which previously hadn't really existed. If you're an online merchant and you have goods to sell to Africa, for instance, that's actually a pretty risky venture right now if you're dealing with a credit card. It's costly, your profit margins are slim as is, dealing with the hassle of chargebacks, etc., it's probably not worth your time. With Bitcoin, you can send money or receive money and know that that money is yours. It can't be taken from you. So if you're a merchant, you can sell something to somebody anywhere in the world. The second that you've got one confirmation on those coins, you can feel comfortable shipping that product. Another really interesting aspect of Bitcoin is that there are virtually no transaction fees. So currently, you can pay roughly 0.0005 Bitcoins to have your transaction included in the next block, which takes roughly 10 minutes to confirm. However, if you so choose, and if confirmation time isn't an issue, you can send money for free and mark your fee at nil. However, it might take longer for your transaction process. But again, 0.00505 Bitcoins is very paltry sum currently. So I think in a lot of ways, if you think about the economy and disregard economics 101 textbooks, I like to view the economy as the sum of all transactions that are occurring within it. And in the current infrastructure that we have available to us, there's an inherent friction when people transact with one another due to the fact that the infrastructure that exists for dispute mediation and financial clearing has an inherent cost. Well, in my mind, Bitcoin has the potential to really usher in a new era for growth in the economy when the dust settles and the volatility subsides, and that it allows people to operate in a much more optimal way when they transact with one another, because they don't have to worry about the infrastructure at hand and basically paying fees just to actually complete economic actions. So this is actually a pretty famous picture right here. One of the earliest and pretty emblematic transactions that occurred in the Bitcoin economy while it was in its nascent stages was a user on bitcointalk.org had traded 10,000 Bitcoins for a $25 pizza. And it's kind of symbolic of how Bitcoin's market sort of grew into existence. At first it was primarily over-the-counter, and still a lot of aspects of it are over-the-counter, but it is definitely coming out of the mainstream. Just as an interesting afterthought, 10,000 Bitcoins is about $1 million today. So it's probably a pretty good pizza. So people ask me, well, so who is using Bitcoin? And unfortunately, it's inherently obscure. There are no real demographics out there. An interesting website that existed, which unfortunately is no longer in existence, is BitcoinEarth.com. And if the creator of that site happens to hear me out, please put it back online. It's great. But basically, I like to look at the adoption rate of Bitcoin fundamentally from the downloads that the initial client has received on SourceForge. So roughly since inception, we've had about 2.9 million downloads of the original client. Interestingly enough, the United States, biggest adopter. Second is China, followed by Germany, the UK, and Russia. So it isn't actually quite a global phenomenon. But again, mind you, most people do not run the original Satoshi client just because it sort of forces you to have the entire blockchain on your computer, which is kind of prohibitive going forward as it currently stands at roughly 8 gigabytes. So just a basic overview of the metrics of the Bitcoin market. I've included this spot price graph from the last year. And inset with it, you can see this in blue, the number of unique Bitcoin addresses that have been used on the network in the last year as well. So while the price has skyrocketed roughly tenfold, the amount of unique addresses has actually gone up sixfold as well. So as you can see, the market is definitely growing, and it's definitely serving a need for people. And quite frankly, it's very exciting, and I think people understand when they delve into the idea that this is something that's never been done before. So it definitely has that appeal factor to the people, which is a big positive for its growth. So I've identified a couple of the key factors which I believe are negatively and positively impacting the further acceptance and adoption of Bitcoin. If anybody of you have ever actually tried to buy or mine a Bitcoin, you know that it's actually not a very straightforward process. It's inherently difficult. Similarly, converting Bitcoin into hard currency is also quite a hassle. You have to deal with over-the-counter transactions, or you can deal on an exchange. And if you need your money today, well, good luck. It's an international bank wire. You're going to get hit on fees in and out, and you're going to be dealing with the infrastructure around international bank wires, which is obviously not too conducive to timely transactions. The other aspect that's sort of prohibitive in the growth phase is that it requires a certain element of technical savvy to get into Bitcoin and to really understand it and capitalize on some of the features that exist in the protocol. Now, on the positive side, there is a stable and growing supply. 3,600 new Bitcoins per day are being introduced into the economy. So the economy is growing in a growth phase, at least for the next 100 years, so long as the price remains stable. Obviously, the expectation for that is pretty minimal. But again, it helps, I think, to think about the supply of Bitcoin as growing, and therefore the market economy for it is growing as well. There is a growing adoption by Bitcoin in the business community. BitcoinStore.com, for instance, you can buy anything with Bitcoin over there, whether it's consumer goods, electronics, etc. BitPay is a truly brilliant company that's been very instrumental in garnering this widespread adoption. BitPay allows any merchant anywhere to accept Bitcoins on their e-commerce website, pay 0.99% roughly in fees, and not have to handle the carry risk and volatility of Bitcoin. BitPay allows you to delegate, okay, I would like 99% of my funds in US dollars in my bank account and 1% in Bitcoin. Alternatively, you can go 100% Bitcoin if you so choose. And again, based on what we're seeing in adoption rates, it seems to be that Bitcoin is satisfying a need that people have to transact in a non-traditional manner that up to this point has not existed. So I think that's a big benefit for its adoption, and people seem to be using it. So the goal of BitcoinAtm is really to spearhead widespread adoption of Bitcoin, primarily for the reason that I believe that Bitcoin has the opportunity to really transform our economy into a leaner, meaner machine, which I think would be better for all humans across the globe. So while I've identified those three key bottlenecks, buying, mining, converting to hard currency, and the technical aspects of it, I think that we've come up with a pretty elegant solution that allows your average person who has no prior knowledge of Bitcoin to really delve into the market. And the way that it works is, this is a standard ATM. You put cash in, you specify where you would like your Bitcoins to be sent, you hit confirm, and they hit your account immediately. Now similarly, we've solved the issue of cash out and converting back into hard currency in a pretty novel manner. You essentially specify a withdrawal transaction. It looks very similar to a standard ATM interface, $20 out, $40 out, $500 out. You select the amount of cash you'd like, and then you press either transfer Bitcoins or scan a private QR code. So if you have a private key, you can just scan it. Otherwise, we will deliver you a receiving address and tell you how many Bitcoins to send to us. Now, unfortunately, we can't give you cash out immediately because, as you know, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, for transactions to be considered valid, they do require a network confirmation. So currently, we are requiring one network confirmation for cash out, which takes roughly 10 minutes. So the other, probably the most interesting aspect of this machine, in the way that I think it can really bring Bitcoin to the mainstream, is that if you don't have a Bitcoin wallet and you have no interest in running a client or using an online wallet, you can create a new address on the fly on the machine. And as you guys probably have a couple of paper wallets out there, you'll see we basically print out your public receiving address and the private key to control those funds. So anybody with cash can buy Bitcoins and hold them in their hand. My personal recommendation is actually to take a picture of it on your phone, just for longevity. But again, this is a way for the average person to get involved in Bitcoin, which is currently quite a complicated process. So many of you probably in the back won't be able to see the demonstration on the machine itself, so I'm just going to briefly go through the user interface on the PowerPoint. This is the welcome screen. You're prompted to buy Bitcoins or cash out. Now if you click buy Bitcoins, you're taken to this screen where you have an on-screen keyboard, although I wouldn't recommend typing in a Bitcoin address. It's much more practical to scan a QR code. If you press scan a QR code, the box will pop up with a camera, and you simply show the QR code to the receiver, which is right there, and it will identify your public receiving address and spit it in. So that's what the QR scanner looks like. At which point, when the machine has recognized your receiving address, it prompts you with, do you want to accept the address, insert bills, create a new address, scan a new QR code, and cancel transaction. So if you accept the address and insert bills, actually this slide corresponds to if you create a new address. So if you don't have a receiving address and you create a new address, it prints out your public key and your private key onto the screen for you. Again, it does also create a paper wallet for you, but I personally would take a screenshot of this on my phone. At which point you accept the address, you insert your bills. You're prompted to this screen, tells you where your Bitcoins will be sent, tells you how many you can buy based on how much money you put in, and when you start to feed money into the machine, a green button will pop up to confirm you can complete your transaction. So now this is the cash out aspect of the machine. The way that it works is when you choose to create a withdrawal, we request either a text message enabled phone number or an email address. And essentially, when you click new withdrawal, you're prompted to this screen, at which point you can enter in your phone number or email address and continue. now you're taken to this screen where you can choose the amount of cash that you would like out from the machine. At which point you're prompted to scan a private key or transfer Bitcoins. And it tells you transaction requires 0.1426 Bitcoin. You can see the price when I did this was $150. It's a little bit different today, but such a Bitcoin. So this is the public receiving address. You take a snapshot of that with your wallet, your mobile app, and you send the Bitcoins. When the Bitcoins have been sent, you press the Bitcoins have been sent button, and it takes you to your receipt page. It's going to tell you, it's going to confirm to your phone number, and you receive a text message right then and there with a link to your receipt online, so you can actually monitor the transaction and see where we are in confirming your money. So that's pretty much it. Really, again, this is a solution to utilize pre-existing hardware that's already in the wild, which quite frankly, the owners of that hardware are all very excited with the idea and potential of not only creating more opportunity for themselves, but being a part of something that they view as quite exciting. So, without further ado, thank you all for coming. I'm going to do the live demonstration right now, and I'd just like to say, I'd like to extend a special thanks to Wes Dunn from GenMega. He's been really instrumental in helping the development process and aiding me along the way. And I think it's, again, pretty emblematic of the fact that there are institutions, particularly in the ATM industry, that are very receptive to the idea. So some people think that Bitcoin can be contentious. Well, interestingly enough, people are motivated by the profit motive. And BitcoinAtm and ATMs everywhere are very interested in scaling this out. So without further ado, open up my virtual environment, and we're going to do a transaction. So
you want to choose so most of people can see in the middle, so we can all
sure
come around here.
Okay. So it's probably difficult to see, but I'll stand back. I'm going to buy Bitcoins right now. So I just press buy Bitcoins. It takes me to my page that I've created. I take my phone out. I scan my QR code. It pops right in. I accept the address, insert bill, at which point the bill acceptor will come online. Feed a Benjamin into there, and I can buy 0.898 Bitcoin. So at this point, I'm going to complete the buy transaction. The transaction's completed. The receipt pops out, and I get something like this, which says, "Thank you for using BitcoinAtm. Here's the address that we sent to, and there's my wallet. You can see the funds just got delivered. And there is a transactional code on the bottom, so you can view this transaction later online for your recipients, etc."
Yeah.
So I'm going to demonstrate cash out functionality now. Press cash out. I'm going to do a new withdrawal. Now I'm going to put in my phone number, because that's the easiest for me. Okay, so at this point, let's get $100 out. I'm going to transfer Bitcoins. It says that that requires 0.96 roughly. So I'm going to transfer Bitcoins. Now, currently, I'm going to be using the blockchain mobile app to do this, but we are working on our own proprietary mobile solution as well. So I've got my blockchain wallet open. I'm going to send Bitcoins and scan the QR code. Just going to scan that QR code. Okay, so it's got the funds, and I'm going to send 0.96. $0.960817. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do a fee. Fast processing. Bitcoins have been sent. Okay, Bitcoins have been sent. That was my confirmation text message. receipt for the transaction. Bitcoin ATM transaction processing, redemption code, gives me my redemption code. We will notify you when funds are available, thank you. Now for brevity's sake, I have disabled network confirmation, so I won't be able to use the redemption code right now. But in real time, it wouldn't be possible. It's probably about a 10-minute wait. So we're going to cash out. We're going to redeem a code. Okay, so my redemption code is R F 61333. Okay, I can accept and withdraw. So it's phoning home. About to get a cash out. So, I just got my $100 out for my 0.96 Bitcoin. So just one final demonstration of the paper wallet process. I'll buy Bitcoins. I don't have a Bitcoin wallet, don't know anything about Bitcoins. I just click create new address. It spits out a brand new public-private key pair. At which point I'm going to accept the address and insert bills. Bill acceptor comes online. Put a $20 bill in. Buy 0.178 Bitcoin. Complete the buy transaction. Coin mine root. Now it's printing the public key, private key pair. And we've got our paper wallet. So that's BitcoinAtm. So I'm going to do a brief Q&A and we can handle that after. Okay. So does anybody have any questions?
Sure. Just a quick question. How will the recent FinCEN guidelines affect your project going forward? How are you addressing that?
Sure. Well, that's the most important question, actually.
Sure,
Glad
right
you asked it. Yeah, so we are moving very slowly, methodically, and cautiously to ensure that we are adherent to the appropriate legal framework because, as many of you know, Bitcoin is somewhat enigmatic in the eyes of the regulators. And in my mind, for this to exist, it needs to coexist with the current system. And I think that's very possible. But again, while the guidelines are not perfectly clear, I can tell you that we will be adhering to certain aspects such as money transmission, money service business law, etc. However, there are a couple of unique propositions for us to partner with people that already have those pre-existing licenses, which would really ameliorate the need for us to shell out a lot of capital to deploy. So I hope I answered your question. Okay. Anybody else?
What about other countries? Are there other places where maybe the regulations are, more hospitable to putting a Bitcoin ATM there?
Absolutely. The United Kingdom is high up on our priority list. It's pretty much, from what we can discern, the best option at this time. But again, our goal really is to capitalize on pre-existing hardware. We will be selling the flagship model, but there's a lot of ATMs out there in the wild, and the switch could be pulled overnight, and they could be bilateral market makers for the Bitcoin economy. So, we'll answer your question.
Okay.
Two questions. One, where exactly are you getting your price right now for buy and sell?
So currently it's plugged into the Mt. Gox API. But again, we do sort of factor in the other exchanges based on the national best bid ask, so to speak, offer. But yeah, we are actually working on our own methods of building out a pretty robust exchange. And I think the name BitcoinAtm is slightly misleading. We're not really an ATM company. I think we will sort of evolve into a financial boutique that services the Bitcoin economy, primarily by bringing on top talent to solve problems like building redundancy into something like an exchange. And
You're going to create your own exchange? That's great. easy.
I agree. So
And then my second question was, so you say you're proceeding very cautiously. So that can't go live right now.
unfortunately, as much as I would like to allow you to all transact on the machine, we've determined that we really don't want to create any legal liabilities that might come back to.
Right.
So unfortunately, it won't be live for the general public. It's just myself transacting with myself. So. That's okay, right?
Do you have any estimate when it might be, hitting the streets?
Well, I would say in 3 to 6 months. And that's really, I'm being conservative. We're in talks with a couple of large ATM operators and manufacturers, and they're ready to go. Obviously, we're most interested in the longevity of the project, of the company, of Bitcoin itself, and too many people have fired from the hip, so to speak, in the Bitcoin startup world, and I think the most important aspect is going to be adhering to the legal framework. That is our primary goal, really. So, I wish it was faster, but...
Yes, 2 quick questions. First one will be, can you address your recent termination of your relationship with Jeff Berwick? And then the second question is, easier one, what's your next immediate goal moving forward? What do you want? What's your objective next?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying Jeff Berwick is a great guy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. We basically had different visions for where this company might go. It's primarily a technology company, and in short, I wish him well in his future endeavors, but he's no longer with us.
And then your immediate goal next?
The immediate goal is to really create the concrete legal framework that we need to operate as a global corporation, which is somewhat of an endeavor, as you might imagine. We would like to be compliant everywhere. That way we can really be on the forefront of putting these things out there and giving people the option. But again, 3 to 6 months is my best guess.
Do you have competition, other virtual currencies that are going forward?
Competition from other companies, or specifically different
Something
cryptographic?
more like a Bitcoin that's also out there now.
Sure. Well, there are alternatives to Bitcoin. In fact, Bitcoin is open source. You can download it, change a couple things, and recompile it and call it whatever you want. I could have Rosecoin if I wanted, but probably nobody would use it. So, in my mind, this ATM is not prohibited to just Bitcoin. And we intend on being incredibly nimble and agile in a way where, as the opportunities arise, we can incorporate things like Litecoin. That's something we're talking about, definitely. But again, we don't intend on being prohibited to Bitcoin by any means.
Did you put the ATM out in Cyprus?
We have not. That's something we're talking about internally. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the sort of differing visions of the company. But Cyprus is an interesting situation, and I think Bitcoin is relevant to countries like that, where people would like to have a certain element of security in their finances. Whether it's Bitcoin, I can't be certain, but in my mind, the ability to hold Bitcoins on a USB drive in your brain, if you so choose, really makes it the versatile solution for people looking to hold on to their wealth.
Can you speak to the interest of your project in places like Germany and China and Russia?
Sure, Bill. We've had a tremendous amount of outreach from those countries. A lot of people are Bitcoin enthusiasts, as you would imagine, all over the world. And Russia, China, Germany, these are heat maps, I believe, for adoption, especially given the statistics that we've seen. So yeah, again, as we develop the appropriate legal framework, we're going to be deploying and licensing the software all over the world.
In what time frame, approximately?
Again, 3 to 6 months
In those countries?
would be my best guess, yeah. I think handling America is the sort of elephant in the room, because ideally we would like to operate in America. So once we handle that, I think the other countries will sort of fall into place.
Just to follow through with that Jeff question a little bit more.
Sure.
You mentioned this morning about some tremendous fees that are going to be involved, or possibly involved in something like this.
Well, so the interesting aspect of this operation is that there's a federal legal requirement that you have to follow, as well as a state requirement to follow. So certain states are incredibly cost prohibitive for us to go out and buy a money service, money transmission license. I know he spoke to the $25 million insurance bond. We're exploring that, but again, our primary goal is to partner with pre-existing companies that already have those licenses in place. And these companies have reached out to us and expressed considerable interest in seeing how they can form a partnership with us. So Jeff raised a valid point. However, I think that the company will be nimble and that we won't necessarily be required to go out and purchase all of these licenses ourselves. We can form strategic partnerships with companies that already have them and are interested in getting into the Bitcoin sphere. I'll take one last question.
So what do you say the average transaction fee will be?
Well, the average transaction fee on our side is 3%. So we charge 3% when you buy and 3% when you sell. Now, if you compare that to the current best over-the-counter product, which is roughly localbitcoins.com, it's very similar. And our friends at BitInstant charge a 4% fee, actually, to buy Bitcoins with cash. So we would be more competitive than them in many ways.
What about Koala?
Well, that's something that we're exploring. It would be interesting to see how Koala might be able to be incorporated with our solution, but we haven't been in direct talks with them. So, anyway, that's all I'm taking for today. I appreciate all of you guys coming, and one last question.
I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Back to the LP. I'm already kidding. How does one purchase the ATM and make a profit?
Sure. Well, the profit model for the operator is similar to the standard ATM model. We handle all of the Bitcoin aspects of the process. Your responsibility as an ATM operator is just to manage cash in the machine. We will be selling the flagship model direct. However, again, I can't give you an exact concrete timeline for that as we are moving very carefully forward. But again, the profit model is that you as the operator, and I'm working on this back end, it's very robust, you will log into your Bitcoin ATM operating back end, and you can set the buy-sell premiums for your machines on top of our 3% fee. And we hope that as we develop our own infrastructure, for instance our own exchanges, we'll be able to minimize our fees closer to be in line with something like BitPay. So over time, as the infrastructure evolves, the profit margins for the operators could be quite significant. But again, you will essentially be specifying the fee that you will be charging on top of our processing fee. And from my calculations, I think that people will probably be acceptive of a 5% fee. That's about where I feel would be comfortable for most people. So you're talking about 2% of every transaction at that point, up to 4% in the future as we lower our costs and develop our own infrastructure. That answer your question?
Partially.
Okay, well,
You're talking to a beginner. I don't, this
Sure.
is way over my head. But
Sure.
I'm trying to get into it as much as possible.
understandable.
From make a profit.
Sure. Well,
I mean, I've got property, I could, hear
well, I
property
think
law and things like that. So that's what's on my mind.
Sure. Well, I think the businesses that adopt the Bitcoin ATMs will sort of garner a certain cachet, in that you've got something nobody else has. Again, though, hard to say what's going to happen when we roll these things out. The demographics are inherently obscure. I can tell you that based on Quantcast, which is an internet analytics company, they've measured that the average Bitcoin user is wealthy. They make $150,000 a year on average, and they're 35 to 45. So it's a growing economy, and I think that people that have their pieces in place will be able to profit and capitalize off of the fact that people are going to be interested in this going forward, so long as it continues to exist, which I think is very likely. And anyway, that's it for today. Appreciate you.